Hey, welcome back to another video. This time we're talking Final Fantasy VII Remake. Final Fantasy VII is one of the most famous games of all time. It's the game that made Final Fantasy in particular, and RPGs in general, matter in the West after years of floundering, and to this day is cited as the best Final Fantasy game and one of the greatest games ever made. I don't really agree with that last part personally, but there's no denying that it is an incredibly iconic game and it did a lot of good for the genre. So when FF7 Remake was announced way back, it was clear it'd have some shoes to fill. How did it turn out? Well, that's kind of complicated, if I'm honest with you. Just saying right out of the gate, I do actually think this is overall a pretty solid game, but it isn't without some pretty major flaws. To begin with, the story is kinda unfinished. Like, quite literally. It does not finish the story of FF7 because, for some reason, Square decided that this needed to be episodic. As such, there's a lot of stuff that doesn't strictly go anywhere because it's all set up for things that would happen later in Final Fantasy VII. This part of the remake only covers a pretty small portion of the game, concluding after the party leaves Midgar. In the original version, which I played alongside this, that took me about 7 hours to get to. It really is just the start of the game, not even the entirety of the first disc, but Remake takes 20 hours to get to that point. I ended up rushing through stuff at the end too, so if you actually took the time to do all the side stuff, it's gonna take even longer, which leads me to my first, and really biggest, complaint about Remake. This thing is bloated as hell. It operates under the assumption that more equals better, but in practice, that really just makes things move at a glacial pace, and results in it feeling like not much of anything really happens. Like, this bit here from the Wikipedia entry for the original game, this is more or less everything that happens in Remake. Granted, there are changes, especially at the end, that end up making it diverge quite a bit from the original game, but in terms of the general plot, that's everything, and they stretched that out to 20 plus hours of game, and man does it feel like it. Even some of the most innocuous parts of the game are blown up, like sneaking through an air duct to overhear a board meeting in the Shinra Tower, and shorter areas of the game, like the sewers and the train graveyard. That last example is especially egregious, as the train graveyard was all of 2 screens in the original game, but in Remake is an area that can take about an hour to get through. It took me maybe 10 to 20 minutes to get through the sewers and the train graveyard combined in the original game, but in Remake, those 2 areas took me 3 hours in total to get through. And again, I was kind of rushing through, or at least I felt like I was. There are some benefits to the game being so elongated like this, like being able to give some actual development to minor characters like Biggs, Wedge, and Jessie. In the original game, they're little more than glorified background NPCs, but in Remake, they're given some time to shine, so you actually end up giving a damn about them when they die, or don't die in Remake's case. Remake also actually shows a few bits that just happened off-screen in the original game, like showing how Aerith gets taken by Shinra in the first place, and those do help flesh out the story a bit more, so stretching things out isn't all around bad. But moments like these are ultimately few and far between, and I really don't think they justify the incredibly slow pace of the game. I'm not the biggest fan of the original Final Fantasy VII, but from what I've played of it, I do like its pacing. It's very brisk, moves at a nice speed, and doesn't feel like it's wasting your time at all. Conversely, Remake very much feels like it's wasting your time, and at a couple of points seems to actually acknowledge that, which is really just rubbing salt in the wound. Yeah, we know having to go through this random fucking tour of Shinra Tower is really annoying and slow, but you're gonna have to do it anyway. It reeks of Square trying to justify squeezing $60, or probably in the foreseeable future $70 out of you for a chunk of a complete game. There's also all these side quests it wants you to do that really only serve to waste time because you don't get much of anything out of them, at least not from the ones that I actually bothered to do. For every quest that gets you a new summon materia, there's like 4 that just give you a potion or something like a calling card that you can't actually do anything with. They are absolutely just another thing that exists entirely to pad the game out. And yes, technically side quests in any RPG do exist to pad the game out, but these ones don't serve to expand anything. Most of them are given by no-name characters that I'm not going to remember when they're over. I don't remember them now, and it hasn't been that long since I played the game. The game will also have you just flat out repeat a couple of areas you've already been through, though admittedly this is not a regular thing. It does, however, make you go through the sewers twice, and it's more or less the same both times, even having you fight the Abzu boss again. I know I keep harping on this, but it really is the biggest issue I have with the game and makes it really hard to truly recommend. To move away from that though, I do have other problems, but they're mostly small pet peeves and nitpicks, so let's just get those out of the way. Firstly, and this is a thing that exists in a lot of RPGs, not just this one, but you cannot change the character you control in the overworld. it will almost always be Cloud. This was the case in the original game as well, but it especially irks me here because you can change who you control by default in battles. And if it's anybody other than Cloud, the camera does this really jarring shift from Cloud to the character you're actually controlling, and it just kind of messes with me. Yes, FF7 is Cloud's story. It makes sense that he's the one you play most of the time. But that doesn't stop a lot of other RPGs. Xenoblade 2 is 100% Rex's story, but I can control Nia at basically any time if I really want to. Even within this very series, Final Fantasy VII is definitely Cecil's story, but it still lets you control Kain or anyone else on the overworld, provided they're in your party. And there are actually a few points in this game where you control the other characters in the overworld, so why can't I do this all the time? Like I said, other RPGs do this, so it's not that big of a deal, nor is it even that big of a deal if it was only this game to do it, but it still really annoys me. Something that also kind of adds to how slow the game feels is that it'll just slow down your movement speed at certain points for no real reason. This is not the only game to do it, and even games that I love do this, but it always drives me up a wall, especially here. It seems to happen all the time in FF7 Remake, even in places where you'd think Cloud would want to get a move on, like when there's someone shooting at him. There's also all of the minigames here that I hate, ranging from this easy to do but still very unfun dancing rhythm game, the bike minigame that it actually lets you skip on replays, and this really fucking pointless pipe clearing thing with Aerith and Tifa, so worthless that I didn't even get footage of it. Seriously, it lasts maybe 2 minutes, did not even need to exist. Again, minigames were present in the original game as well, so it's not like this is a remake exclusive problem, but they are still here, and they do end up breaking the flow the game does establish, and, say it with me, pad the game out. So, after all of this bitching, you might, reasonably, be wondering why at the top of this I still said that I think Remake was a mostly good game. Well, that all boils down to one really simple thing. The combat is really, really fun. For real, a lot of the stuff in between the battles is tedious, dull, or just plain annoying, but I kept going through that shit because when I got to the combat, I was having a blast. You fully control one character during battles, with the others acting independently, but at any time you can issue commands to them with tactical mode, or even just fully switch to control another character if you so choose. Every character plays differently, each suiting a different style of play. Wanna hang back and deal with enemies while staying out of the big scuffles? Go with Barret. Wanna rush in and just hit shit until it dies? Go with Tifa, which is what I did most of the time. Aerith is if you want to play a more supportive role and attack with magic, and Cloud is all around good for pretty much whatever. Of course, you won't always have everyone available to you, so you won't be able to just stick with one character the whole time, but everybody's fun in their own ways, so you're pretty much always going to be having a good time. Combat is fast and fluid, hits feel like they have weight to them. It's just damn fun to fight stuff in this game, and like I said, it's what kept me going through all the shit that annoyed me, which was a lot. And this is only further exemplified in the Intermission DLC, a side story featuring Yuffie, which is all completely original stuff. It's a pretty quick little thing, I beat it in less than 4 hours, but I think that actually ends up working to its benefit. Since it's not adapting anything from the original game, it doesn't need to pad anything out, so it loses basically all of the bullshit that bugged me about the main game, while keeping all of the stuff that's really good. Outside of the gameplay, there are still other good things to be said, like with the visuals. I don't normally like to focus on this, but even I gotta admit that Remake looks pretty fucking good. Even better than I can really show in this video since I recorded at 720p and 30 FPS, but the game runs at 60 and up to 4K on powerful enough systems. Like I said, I'm not much of a stickler for graphics, and I really can't tell much of a difference between 4K and even 1080p, but I always dig 60 FPS when it's an option, and there were a lot of points where this game's visuals blew my damn mind. A lot of realistic looking games are still pretty heavy into the uncanny valley, I feel, but FF7 Remake is just stylized enough that it doesn't hit that level. So at the end of the day, I'd say that I did enjoy my time with Final Fantasy VII Remake, but it's a hard game to recommend. At best, I can say that it gets good at the end, but that's 20 hours of nonsense and bullshit that you have to get through before you hit the good stuff. Granted, there's the combat that's fun even in the annoying parts of the game, but I can definitely see people getting fed up with all the padding and not being willing to continue even with the fun battles. That said, maybe the extra stuff won't bother you as much as it did me, in which case you're getting a pretty solid remake of a PlayStation classic, plus some damn good brand new stuff with Intermission, and probably with future parts given the ending of this one. So yeah, it's a bit tough to say whether or not you should pick this up. If you're on the fence, I'd maybe at least suggest picking it up on sale so you're not spending full price on it. Remake Part 2 is due to finally be shown off sometime this year, according to producer Yoshinori Kitase, so we'll end up seeing if it'll keep keep up the momentum, or go right back to being padded to hell. But that's all for now, and I will see you guys next time.